Hello everyone, Tarnished Onryo here. Recently, I uploaded a video about the drama between invaders and co-opers in Elden Ring. I got a lot of engagement on that video with a very mixed reception, both positive and negative. And today in this video, I wanted to go over some of these comments and with as much of an unbiased look into it as possible. Look into the good, the bad, and the ugly. To begin, OG, another Get Good Champion channel to block. It's really tragic that none of you sociopaths ever consider the possibility that maybe people just want to play the game with their friends without some cheat A, try hard, lag stabbing, crystal tier bombing their run every 10 darn minutes. I bought my nephew a full copy plus the DLC for the DLC release. This was the first Souls game he loved watching me play and wanted nothing more than to do co-op. 11 deaths later, he uninstalled and I don't blame him. He'll never touch a Souls game again because a cavalcade, I'm not sure what that word is, of poop stains decided to ruin a 9-year-old's first time, and this guy burning his channel to justify them. Well, I guess to begin with here this is a little bit difficult for, I think, the average person to not take personally, especially opening up with calling me a sociopath, but I'm not going to take it personally. Instead, what I will tell you is when I first started playing these games, I had a similar feeling. Yeah, I felt personally attacked. I felt really upset. You know, especially back in the Dark Souls 1 and 3 days when I was playing those, you could be invaded solo. So it felt really bad, you know, being a complete noob to the game, and people who were really good at PvP were just absolutely deleting me and sometimes even trolling me, you know, like letting me get hits on them so they could set up for parries and stuff. That felt bad. And just like your nephew, I quit the game for a very long time. I really did. But after a few months of thinking back on it in reflection, I just decided, you know, I'm not going to be the victim. I'm not going to play this victim game here because I could just get as good as that guy was too at PvP and just get better at this. Now, I don't blame your nephew. Being a 9-year-old kid, I could see how that'd be very distressing, you know, especially him being so young. That's it's probably going to be a lot more difficult to control your emotions. But you can. You are the adult in this situation, right? And you're sort of feeding into this idea that it's okay to not only be this outwardly emotional, but also disparage people like that and call people sociopaths. I really hope that's not the example that you're setting for him. And I think that's really one of the biggest problems we have in our society today is raising children to grow up to be these perpetual victims and blame everybody but themselves when it comes to their hardships. It isn't my fault that you or your nephew are having a hard time in this game. You know, it's not a person's fault for playing the game the way the game was intended to be played. Invasions are absolutely an intended part of the game. They have been in From Software games for over a decade, and your refusal to see it in that way is not the fault of mine, but of your inability to be a little bit more emotionally mature. So I hope for your nephew's sake that you mature and show him a better example. Your end note, though, dead on, bro. Watching others and seeing what they do, learning and trying your own way, and failing is how you get good. Exactly. See, these games were never intended to be easy. They were always created with the intention of being hard, so that when you overcome the challenge, there's this massive feeling of satisfaction and relief. And that includes invasions. These have been a core mechanic of FromSoft games for a very long time, over a decade, and I don't see them going away anytime soon. It might not be fun for newcomers, it might not be easy, but everybody's a newcomer at some point. And anybody who cares will get good at it if they try hard enough. If you're going to give up on the hardships in a video game, that's kind of concerning when it comes to what are you going to do in your real life when things get difficult if you're not even willing up to keep up with it when it's just in a video game. And I'm not referring to the 90-year-old nephew. I'm talking about people in general. You know, there's going to be a lot more difficult things in your life than what's happening in a video game. And you may want to realize that taking things personal in a game has bad implications for how you're going to take things in real life. Just get in there, do some PvP battles, go to the arena where it's 1v1, practice, get good at PvP, and you'll be able to handle these invaders in no time, just like I did. That's exactly how I learned. I got into it. I started getting invaded, even solo. I got pretty good at thwarting off invaders, and it became just one of my favorite things to do in game. Tell you what, I'll help you do it if you want to. I'll go into the arena with you and I'll help you. Just hit me up. Invasions are the best part of Souls games, but invaders always deserve to get ganked. All right, you know what? Based. That's true. They are invaders in your world after all. You are allowed to use every means necessary, no matter what any invader says. Even if you've heard any of my old videos and you heard me say this, that, or the third about hosts and their co-opers. In the end of the day, it is your world, and they are invaders. And yes, you are allowed to use any means necessary to get rid of them. There's nothing wrong with that. And as long as you're winning, hey, who cares what you do, right? I mean, when it comes to the invader, obviously, yes, he's going to try as hard as he can because he already knows that he's at a disadvantage being 1v2, 1v3. But in that same token, I understand that most hosts and co-ops are probably not as experienced in PvP, hence why they're doing co-op in the first place. And if you have to do what you got to do to get rid of them, that's totally okay. Bro, just play offline. That's right. I mean, the truth is, if you don't want to be invaded at all, you can just play offline. You will never be invaded. You can use Spirit Ashes, your Mimic Tier, Black Knife Tish, whatever spirit summon you like, and nobody could ever invade you, as long as you're playing solo. Elden Ring was my first FromSoft Souls-like game. Co-op makes sense. PvP makes sense. Random people invading your game to grief you because you're playing with a friend only makes sense to old-school Dark Souls players. It feels personal, it feels violent and intrusive. If you want to fight real people, go do PvP. Not mess with people minding their own business. Getting mad because people are upset you're wasting their time is ridiculous. Well, first of all, let's start off with I'm not mad. You know, they say getting mad because people are upset. Nobody's mad. Me addressing the co-op invader drama isn't out of anger. It's just an observation, and I thought it was worth talking about. You also mentioned that for old Dark Souls players, invasions make sense, but for you, they feel violent, intrusive, and personal. So what does that mean exactly? To hell with all the Dark Souls players? I feel like that's a bit of an entitled statement to make because let's remember that the Dark Souls series was originally a failed project. And it wasn't until basically a cult following of devoted Dark Souls fans made the game a lot more popular, spreading it among other gamers, eventually making it popular enough to come out and make Elden Ring even a possibility. So it wouldn't make sense for them to make what made these old games so successful suddenly something that needs to be banned. That'd be first of all, a very ungrateful approach to the people who made this game possible in the first place. And again, like I said, very entitled to think that because you feel this way, a core part or a core mechanic of the game should be just completely removed. You might have forgotten, but nobody was born with 100,000 hours of Souls experience under their belt. You know, everybody was new to this at some point. Everybody experienced invasions for the first time. Everybody, was destroyed in PvP for the first time in these games. You know, you're not unique or special in this case. Everybody goes through it, and everybody who's good at it now started somewhere. Now, this is from the same commenter. I play offline only, but I watched the whole thing, left a comment and reply. As a FromSoft noob, you have to realize there are millions of new players experience poorly explained invasions because they're struggling with a new game and decide to ask for help. It doesn't matter that they have an advantage. It's an invasion. It feels hostile and personal. People are going to B-word when someone tries to kill them for no reason. If you want to fight real players, go to the Colosseums where everyone is prepared and ready to fight. Why do you have to ambush people minding their own business? Shut up and let me ruin your day, Elden Ring Invader. Okay, so like I said before, everybody was a noob at this game at some point. Okay, so me personally, this is just my own personal story. I didn't start the Souls series until maybe like 5 or 6 years after Dark Souls 3 had already released. So there was a lot of people who were already way better at this game than I was. And a lot of these things aren't explained to anybody, especially back in the Souls series. There was very little to no explanation how things worked. When I first got invaded, I didn't know why that happened. I didn't know that restoring my humanity or my ember was making me invadable. None of those things were very obvious. Everybody is kind of caught by surprise by these things when they're new to these games. And as another analogy, imagine if I walked onto a basketball court with LeBron James and then I cursed and ridiculed him for being a lot better than me, telling him that, hey, it's not fair. I'm a noob at this game. You shouldn't be as good as you are, or you shouldn't be beating me at this game because I'm new. How entitled does that sound? To be telling somebody who took the time and effort to get good at something that he's wrong for doing that. And that because I am less experienced, he should bend over to me and make things easy for me. That's not the way you look at things. And if that's the way you look at things in your life, again, that is a very entitled way of looking at life in general. And instead of doing that, again, like I previously said, just learn to do it yourself the way I did. And you'll come to realize it's not all that bad. You can get to learn to make these things much easier for yourself with just a little bit of time and practice. I don't get why you're forced to play PvP when you just want to play co-op. My friend who is new to the game didn't want to play with me anymore because he can't fight invaders really, as well as the summoning system being confusing for new players. I'm not sure if the password matching affected our matchmaking, but we'd get people with higher level stuff, probably because of me, and my friend would get two tapped. A co-op system usually makes the game easier, but with FromSoft, it will be deceptively harder for new players. Well, this goes again with what I said in the past. You're not forced to do anything. You can only be invaded if you summon a human co-opper. But I want to play with my co-op, you said. I want to play with my friends, you say. Yeah, so do a lot of other people. Everybody who summons has to deal with the consequences of being invaded. You're not special in that. Also, invaders cannot invade anybody past their own level range. And that only depends on the host. So if the host is level 45 and summons a level 500 fully maxed out, co-op character with plus 25 weapons, the host is still going to only be able to be invaded by invaders in their own level range. So that means another invader around level 45 with plus 4 or 5 weapons, whatever the range of the host is. So if your host is being killed in 2 shots, that isn't the invader's problem. They are not over leveled because you're over leveled. Over level, the phantoms don't dictate the type of invaders you get. What that means is that your friend needs to seriously reconsider his vigor stat, because a lot of new players especially will put a lot of points into their strength and dex and intellect and faith. They want to do big damage, but they can't take big damage. And that's something that's common. A lot, if not most, new Souls-like game players make the mistake of not leveling their health before other things. And you'll notice if you look at my health bar, does your health bar look that big? Does your friends? I bet it doesn't. And that's a lot of the reason why I end up surviving a lot of my invasions. Because if you can't take hits, it doesn't matter how much damage you can dish if you're just being deleted in 1 or 2 shots anyway. A lot of people also just don't like forced PvP. That's why I don't like games like Black Desert. I want to enjoy an RPG solo the way it's meant to be. So I always just put Souls game in offline mode so I don't have to deal with the other players. I want my solo experience. Okay, well, I think I've already said this, but it's not forced. You have a choice. But you said you just played in offline mode. Perfect. That's exactly what I say to most people who have these same complaints. If you don't want to be invaded, play it offline. That's an option. You can totally do that. But as for the PvP experience, that is the way it's meant to be. These games are always made with invasions in mind. Miyazaki even said it in one of his own interviews about the game, is that, invaders were put into the game with the intention of making that random experience and that feeling of adrenaline you get when this random powerful enemy enters your world. That was the part of the experience. It was meant to be that way. And again, I should also note that these games aren't meant for everybody. If you don't like it, you don't have to play it. You can't play something else. If what I'm saying is too much for you and you can't accept it, that's okay. Again, these games aren't made for everybody. You don't have to play it. If you want to give up and play something else, that's totally fine. No judgment. People who don't invade have never actually played the game. People who don't like being invaded don't actually like Souls games. That's exactly right. Like I just said in the last comment. Invasions are a core mechanic of these games. They always have been. So if you don't like that, you just don't like Souls games. And that's okay. Like I said, that's okay to say. If you don't like Souls games, don't play Souls games. You can play something else. But you can't complain about something that's always been a part of the game just because you're new. Again, that's entitlement. None of you make a lick of sense. Invasions should either not exist or should be toggle. End of story. This is just another case of I'm new to the game, therefore it should be the way I want it. Again, just another case of entitlement. You're not entitled to things changing just because you don't like it or you're new to it. You're just coping about coping. Invasions need to be voluntary. I'm not sure what I'm coping about here. That sounds like another projection to me, but again, they are voluntary. You volunteer for co-op. I mean, you volunteer for invasions when you summon for co-op. Initial rant about get good aside, this is terrible, man. I know Souls community can be weirdos, but dang, nobody deserves harassment over some in-game activity. And not to mention, in Elden Ring, you're not losing any progress basically after invasions. And everybody still died to gravity like 10 times more to invaders. That sucks, man. Okay, so there he made a little bit of a joke about how gravity is the biggest killer of people. If you know much about Souls games at all, you always see that the number one enemy of Souls players is gravity. But that's a pretty base take. You know, that's a pretty adult take to make. And he said, my initial rant about get good aside, but the thing is, my initial rant wasn't really about getting good. I was just saying, I don't do that kind of thing. Oh, get good, scrub. I don't do that. I know that these games are difficult. And if I ever say the words get good, I don't mean it in the GITGUD sense. I mean like actually practice. Get good at it in the sense that there is a way to improve at these games. And I appreciate your comments about people not having to be in-game toxic. Let us keep in mind that the reason I made that last video in the first place was because people were sending me and saying very terrible and very toxic things to me solely because I was invading them, you know. But overall, I appreciated that comment. I used to hate invaders. Now I just smack y'all around, especially when invaders aren't good. It's so funny. The crazy thing is I always get hate mail. I just laugh. Messaging anyone is crazy to me. Now this is the kind of guy that I'm talking about right here. See, he hated invaders. And then what did he do? He got good at playing the game. He got good at playing PvP. And now what does he do? He smacks around his invaders. And that was exactly the route that I took back in the Dark Souls days. I hated invaders as well. And I started doing things like playing co-op or joining the Hunter Covenant so that I could summon in as a blue to help smack off invaders. You know, I had this vindictive feeling and this feeling of vitriol against invaders too. And after doing so many of these co-ops and Hunter, you know, summons, I started to realize I'm getting better at this. You know, I can smack around my own invaders as well. And then I started doing it in 1v1s, in my solo invasions, because, you know, back in Dark Souls, you could be invaded solo. And then I started invading. I mean, you don't ever have to move on to invasions if you don't want to. But you can always get better at fighting off your invaders. So, very base take. Thank you for that comment. Now, this one was probably one of my favorite comments. If people treated invaders like unpaid actors on a haunted house ride, instead of these unhinged takes, maybe invasions might be more accepted by casuals and co-opers. It's the equivalent of a Karen screaming death threats because an actor frightened them on a ride that's clearly labeled, where the whole point of the ride is to be scared, stimulated, and thrilled. It's baffling that people don't do a little bit of research so they can make informed decisions before buying a game, making a complaint. I also find it weird how people don't criticize themselves before criticizing others. You have a great growth mindset, by the way. Keep up the good work. Don't give up, skeleton. Just a little context on that. Don't give up, skeleton was a message that you could leave, like one of the signs on the floor that you can leave in Elden Ring, but back in the Dark Souls games. And he is absolutely right. You can learn that this is the way the game is intended to be played. You don't have to have bought the game before you find out that these things happen. You could have done a little bit of research on how the game works. I don't really know how anybody just jumped on the bandwagon of Elden Ring, unless that's what it was. Exactly that. People jumping on the bandwagon of Elden Ring because they've just heard it was a good game, which is, I'm assuming, how a lot of new players came into it. But if you just do even a little bit of basic research, one of the biggest things about the Souls series in general was the invasions. You know, the content creators that survived the test of time were, one, lore content creators, and two, invasion content creators. This was a very well-known and obvious thing about the Souls series. And if you did do a little bit of research, you would have known that. And you would have avoided looking like these Karens getting mad at people doing their job, basically. I don't invade. It conflicts with my sense of self, but I don't mind invaders. I co-op a lot and I'll defend my host to the death. Not a fan of hunters. I'm capable enough and I don't need help keeping the host safe. LOL. Hey, yeah, totally fair take. Perfect. You don't have to like invasions. You really don't. You know, but getting good at player versus player is going to be massively to your benefit in these games, because it's always going to happen as long as you're co-oping, right? So not wanting to invade, if it inflicts with your sense of self, I mean, the way I see it, it's just a video game. I don't ever take it like I'm actually doing something harmful to somebody. But if you do feel that way about it, you don't have to. You don't have to take part in invasions. It's not a must. But getting good at the player versus player aspect of the game will be greatly to your benefit, of course. All I'm hearing is that you're bored with the game and made it other people's problem. God, this antiquated PvP system is so tiring. Well, yeah, I will admit that I did get bored with certain aspects of the game, so I moved into invasions. But it wasn't to make it other people's problems. I don't see anything wrong with wanting to delve into and enjoy every aspect that the game has to offer. It is what I paid for after all, is it not? This is all because Souls games got popular. It did not used to be like this. Yeah, that's true. With popularity brings a whole new crowd of new people. So I should have kind of just assumed that it was going to be this way. More people equals more opinions. However, like I said before, this has always been the formula, and I don't see that changing. And if it does, then it does. If it doesn't, then again, this is the way they've always been. Just, in other words, figure it out or just stop playing them. You know, like, there's nothing I personally am going to be able to do about this to make this a better experience for you. You can decide whether you want to take part in it or not. So with all that said, I do want to note, I just really love this game. Okay, so PvP is not the only thing I do. I still do enjoy the base game. I still do a lot of co-op. I do. And I enjoy making videos about other things as well. So if you enjoy this, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. And if there's any other things you'd like to see on this channel, I mean, I do lore stuff, I do build stuff, I do invasion stuff, I do co-op stuff. I'm okay with anything. But a little bit of feedback from you guys would also be really helpful. So if you watched to this point in the video, I want to thank you so much. Again, please leave a like and subscribe if you liked it. And I'll see you in the next videos. Thank you.